A time of war is Eastern Europe, 1590 to 1660, a time period that I've covered and enjoyed a great deal of games on, but there aren't a lot of them that focus on the eastern side of things. You know, this is a game that's, well, first off, this is a review copy and one of very, very few that I've actually asked for. I have a fair number that I've done that, somebody has asked me to do. But this one I actually was pointed out by Rick Kelly, who watches a lot of my content, and stuck it in my head from some modifications that he put in, going back into the 90s to other games. And yeah, I was like, wow, this is really in my wheelhouse in terms of the content of the game. Unfortunately, I'm a little sick. I'm hoping my cough isn't too bad anymore. I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. But I was hoping to get this started about a week ago, and a number of things got in the way. So yeah, there are not a lot of games based on this topic at all. EU comes to mind. This is a game that's based very much, and the designer, gives credits, on Here I Stand, and on, to a lesser extent, Sword of Rome. Both games that I love the designs for. And you'll see some of that. So in terms of Here I Stand, like the player aid cards for Here I Stand, where you have, a leader card who affects how you do things, and you have keys in Here I Stand. Here you have fortified cities instead. That serve the same kind of purpose, where they generate some of your victory points. In fact, probably the majority of your victory points, but there are other things that affect them. All tracked here, some of them tracked in terms of other reminders on the board, including the keys table. Here I Stand, I think, used a shared deck, and Sword of Rome definitely used individual country decks. So, this is going to be a CDG style game, like those are. But here you have per country decks in play, which allows events to be more tailored to any particular nationality, player, whatever. But in addition, like you have these fixed cards, your special cards, that you get every turn, that are powerful cards that give you capabilities that you can do on a regular basis. Those were sort of the, hey, how is each country kind of different? One of the facets in it, in Here I Stand. Well, here in addition, the entire deck is also individual to that nationality. And maybe going overboard, but we'll see. I don't know. Certainly, you get lots and lots of cards. The quality of the cards, they're kind of stiff, like some of those higher quality, higher end GMT CDGs. I'm not a real big fan of those type because they are a pain to shuffle. I shuffled all the decks except for the Turks, and then found out that, each player also has a choice at the early stage of the game to draw a card initially, or cards, and make a choice between those in terms of what they're going to be able to start the game with. Excuse me. Okay. First thing off, this is a game that was written in Poland, which is another plus factor from my point of view. I'm always in favor of seeing, expansion of the hobby and, more product coming out from other places. But that does have an effect, like the Azure Wish games that were developed in France. There's a couple of things. One, The grammatical issues in the rulebook sometimes will cause confusion. But also, I get the feeling, and this is something that many of the European designs seem to have, that there's sort of a very loose way of dealing with the rules, in the sense that there's not really an attempt to absolutely pin everything down. Now, usually I'm very much in the position that, hey, the recent American games from many companies are trying to pin too much down. They're trying to nail down and make sure you don't make any stupid mistakes that a little bit of reasoning can get you through. But this is maybe, well, this is definitely on the other end of that. And when you add the grammatical issues, sometimes you're not sure what is meant. And I'm sure you can ask questions on the fora. I probably will not. Although, I don't know, I may, if something comes to that kind of extent. So far from my read-through, which again was a couple weeks ago, of the base rules, I felt like, yeah, I see some places where I'm not sure what they mean, but I can come up with my answer and it'll be as good as anything. Okay, so what do you have? Well, let's take a look at kind of the broad basis of the components. Then I'm going to dive into the rules, and that's what I do every damn time, and basically read through them with you. That'll help me to understand the rules better, because I've only read them once and haven't gotten a chance to play yet. But it'll also give you some feel for what the rules specifically are, rather than the kind of light overview that I might give. The light overview is really, hey, this looks like a Here I Stand type game. You know, it's a CDG. You're not going to have the same kind of religious conversion. Religious conversion is really more of kind of a cultural conversion than just religious. Each of the major players has their own religious background, which is, definitely a different kind of situation. And it's sort of how you indicate full control of an area, is by converting the religions. So, the Swedes are going to be Protestants. You have two different Catholic areas, though. So you have the Polish Catholics and the Habsburgs. And, it's essentially the same religion. So calling it religion is a little misleading. And I think that's my fault rather than anything else. But, it comports more with not just religion, but also with the whole culture, etc. of the area. And you have, your point-to-point map. You have different types of locations in it. The fortified cities, which are the equivalent to the keys. Fortresses, we'll get into them a little bit later, but you can see they're covered by a small thing, so they don't count as key value locations. Actually, that's Danzig, which has its own rules, but here's another fortress. Normal cities, which are going to be easier to capture. Some things are marked as ports, allowing them naval access. There's plain terrain points, which don't even count as cities. So, that's just sort of empty territory. Roads, which are going to be your normal movement terrain, but then there are trails, which indicate a somewhat more difficult movement cost. Danzig has its own special rules, including a long siege process to take place there. Normal turn record track, normal place for the victory points to go. This is going to be, for the Russians, they have the capability to explore the east. Again, if you've watched my EU video, this is, or if you're familiar with history, this is a period where Russia had not yet expanded into those eastern territories, and they're working their way through it. And this contains some of the most interesting periods in EU that are not well handled there. Russia is so foobar in EU that they just can't manage to operate themselves. And the fact that the Poles are a non-player country in EU means that they are, and a very large and powerful one, means that they're basically invulnerable. There's almost no way to take them down that I've found. So I found Russia to be almost impossible to get historical results, much less win the game or whatever. You just don't, I'm not worried about victory in EU. I'll be more careful with this, but in EU, the victory conditions, there's no attempt to balance the game, and you just have to accept that. Combat result table, which we'll explain when we get to that. But basically, you're rolling versus your value versus a 2d6 to give you a nice randomizer, and that's how many hits you do to the enemy. It's not a buckets of dice system like the other two that it's reliant on. You've got a dip chart. I don't recall there being a dip chart in either of those games. There is one in Napoleonic Wars, and there might be in Here I Stand. I don't recall. But this tracks both major power diplomacy and also diplomacy with powers that aren't directly controlled by players. So that's kind of a nice combination there. A little space to keep your events. For the different player aid sets, the cards are your standard CDGs with an operation and an event. And you have a choice between whether you take the ops points and the events. Some of them will have a plus on the card number. I don't know if I have any revealed. No. That plus indicates that you can play a second card if you play it for operations points. It also appears to have other implications. And again, we'll get to that, where the plus card can be used without an additional card, and it gives you some additional advantages instead. Okay. Units on the board. I'm going to have to peek at, it's been a little while, at how the units are broken up here, because we got two numbers on them, and I know one of them is, yeah, here we go. So one of them is the combat value, the actual effectiveness of the unit. The other is the manpower, which is going to be your cost for that unit to some extent, but it also, I believe, affects losses. We'll see. I don't really recall that. You have these neat little standees, which represent specific army groups, and they have a leader on board them. It's possible, I guess, and I think I've done this, to have a standee without a leader on it, just because, hey, I don't want all these units in the Istanbul box. It's not a big deal. That's sort of an off-board box. Only the Turks can use it, but it seemed easier to push that off the board, at least for now. What else do we have here? Well, we have the army boxes, which correspond to the standees. We have a list of actions that each player can take, and these are going to be a little different for each player. For the most part, there's a standardized set, like movement by a space on a road or trail, which costs different operational points, taking a siege, assault, controlling a city. And I don't think any of these change. Performing plunder. But then we get to things, well, the one fund marker, you're basically expending operational points to get a fund marker, and I think those are always 3. But then there's special things, so like the Poles can pay for the Cossacks to work for them, and that costs you operations points. Because in a sense, the operations points are sort of money. Fund is a little different. It's like a harder set of money, I guess. I don't know. Because you get your reinforcements and whatnot using your operations points. So, and you'll see that here in the Army recruitment, you spend operations points to get the units. All the different units have different costs listed for them. I don't remember what the manpower is for. Obviously, it's not by cost. And then here's a special thing that allows you to move the Cossacks control track, which I haven't found. It's got to be down here somewhere. I don't know. I don't see it. On the Tsardom of Russia's superpower sheet. Yeah, okay. So this is going to be here on the Russian sheet. The Russians are also able to play with this, I think. Yeah. but the Poles were able to try to prevent the Russians from getting control of the Cossacks. And I haven't found all of these. So we got the Union of Brest here, which is something that I probably can perform, but I think that requires a card or something to be in play and use. Got two different markers for that. I can't read this. It's too small for me. Yeah, and that's why I kept this off the board, because I want to deal with them as I get to them. Again, you know, not everything in the setup booklet told you where to put all these different things. I've read about them in the rules, but I don't really remember, and I'll hit them as I hit them. You also have individual leaders. Individual leaders have a couple of things on them. Nice little picture. The turn that they're in play. Now, sometimes there's conflicts here. So we got like Murad III and Mehmet III are both turn 1 leaders. And I've got that aside because I have to figure out which one is actually the leader. One of them can become the leader on that turn, though. You have the name of the leader, and then some special things. They can provide you with additional cards each turn. They can allow you to hold cards each turn. This is here I stand type stuff. A limit to how many funds you can accumulate for, you know, the usage there. And they have an effect on the domestic policy in this case. This, I think, is... I don't know if you mark this on the track or not. And I don't know that the rules are specific about this, whether or not this impacts the track while he's in play. Now, there's also a little arrow here, which indicates he's healthy and in good shape. If he gets to be not in good shape, as he ages, he can flip over and become a worse leader. In this case, he stays about the same. I don't think anything, he keeps a preserved card, yeah. I don't think anything changes. Now, the preserved cards, you have to play all your cards each turn up, but you're allowed to preserve a certain number of them. So you can hold on to certain cards, and those don't count against your draws, if I recall correctly. So you'll just have a bigger hand the next turn if you preserve cards. So there's generally a good reason to preserve things, but now and then you'll want to, you'll need, you know, the extra plays. And there's a whole, basically, small deck of leaders for each player to indicate their historical rulers during the period. I gotta swap batteries. I'll be back in a little bit. Before we dive into the rules, I had to touch on one other thing, which I thought was kind of nice. So there's an errata. A few things were missed in the setup book that probably very clearly, you know, at some point or another, somebody said, hey, where do these values start? Because a lot of the things have a start marker on them, but not everything does. And I'm trying to see what doesn't. That's right. These card things, so these are marked with no abilities or whatever, and then there's counters that indicate the changes of ability in there. A whole bunch of counters for leaders. These aren't just the rulers, these are the military leaders. Some rulers have a military leader counter, some do not. A bunch of markers, including a pile of events, which I probably need a cup for. These guys used on here to mark, got some countries at war here, so Sweden and Russia start at war. These are used to mark a vassalage state. The Turks were, they're European territories that they conquered in Europe. To a large extent, they tended to put into a vassalage state and keep the Christian territory Christian for a variety of reasons. But anyway, but the thing I wanted to mention was there's a bunch of counters in this bag here. These were misprinted. And, you know, this is a good sign for me, for a company. By the time they made out their errata and were ready to start shipping, they threw in a pile of extra counters. Those aren't them. Those are the ones that got replaced from the normal counter sheet. And apparently, did a special print run to fix the issue before they sent it out, before they released the game. I find that really positive. I mean, I really do. Most companies don't tend to catch stuff like that. All right, and you have your rule book, your basically playbook. It's a scenario book, which is in full color. The other one is not. You have this little play aid here, which tells you all the different spaces and what religion, and they call it religion, but again, I think it's more than that, because, again, you have your Catholics here. It's hard to tell. What do you want to call, what do you want to call the Habsburg territories? I don't know what to call it. It's Catholic, mostly, but yeah. Okay. And on the backs of each of these is historical information about some of their cards and some of the meanings and whatnot. Nice use of the backside of play aids and whatnot. Unfortunately, what it means is if I draw something and don't know what it is, I'm not going to be able to look it up right away, because you need these to be able to play. I considered photocopying them, but my printer is shit, and I don't want to do that. Okay. Before I dig into the rules, I'm going to swap pipes. It's going to take me a while to get through the rules, because although they're not terribly long, only 20 pages, I am a little ill, and, it always takes a while. But, yeah, well, this will give you the specifics and how this is sort of different from your Here I Stand and whatever. And then we'll move on to the playthrough and whatnot as we go. And given the way my life is, it's going to take me a while. It's going to take me a while to get through anything these days. For those of you who are wondering, hey, what's up with Aspirin Essling? Yeah, what is it, like 10 of you who maybe are actually not just watching it, but care that it finishes. It's still up there. I'll still get to it. I'm halfway through the game, but I feel like, given my slow pace of things, I have to get the things that I've agreed to do for other people out. So I may just not be much in the mood for more conventional war games right now. I've been feeling, and it's really nice to let myself be drawn away from one. My eye keeps straying to more modern designs of one sort or another. Okay. So we got anything here? We got a bunch of, telling you about the game, but also telling you sort of policies of the rules, things like a capitalization as names of auxiliary markers and capitals, etc. Okay. See if there's anything exciting I need to do that I haven't covered yet. Every superpower has its own special track, at least one, I guess. So here you have Tater Invasions. I should have a counter that corresponds with that. I don't know which one that is. I don't have that. Oh, I didn't mention on these. So on the backs of both the fortified city and the normal control markers, there is a question mark instead of a normal. And I thought this was going to be hidden units or something. It's not. What this is this is the areas in good control under that religion, culture, whatever. And this is, there's some sort of heresy or other problem that makes it not work properly. No. Why do I have Frederick William here? I feel like I don't have all the counters on the board yet, because I've got, like, the neutrals are not placed. I don't have any control markers placed. However, there don't seem to be any required to be placed. And we'll see if that makes sense. You know, I followed the, hey, this is what you do. Then I got to the, hey, we have to draw these special cards. And now there's a set of special rules, which I read up. And then we have other scenarios in play as well. All of which are marked as introductory scenarios and are just like a turn. I didn't try one of them because I think I understood the basic mechanisms, maybe not anymore. Okay. So these special markers, I guess we have to go over these. So Kingdom of Sweden has an iron ore track, and in order to move that marker, you have to pay an ops points card with a value of 3, which is the highest value they have. You can't combine lower value cards using the plus capabilities. The iron ore marker can be moved to the left if, and this is the kind of grammatical stuff that I'm talking about, that it's understandable, but in the removal of auxiliary markers phase, the iron ore marker can be moved to the left, period. If on national spaces of the Kingdom of Sweden is one revolt marker or one famine marker, move iron ore marker 1 box to the left. You can make your sense out of it. It's just, there's something very odd when seeing it as an English natural speaker. That's fine. If there are 2 or more revolt and or famine markers, move iron ore marker by 2 boxes to the left. In the funds gaining phase, the player will get funds markers based on the iron ore that they get. We don't know what funds markers do right now. I believe they can be turned in for cards, among other things, but they may have other uses. Okay. The Tsardom of Russia has the Cossacks control marker. When it's in the 3 box, player may play as event Cossacks under control card. Again, the wording's a little weird. Nothing to really gripe about. It's just, it would be, this could be very off-putting to some people. I actually find it kind of charming. But to move the marker by 1 box to the right, you must play an ops card for 3. No combination. To move it by 1 box to the left, the Polish-Lithuanian player plays a value 3. Same kind of thing, just going in the other way. When it reaches the 3 box and card Cossacks under control is played as an event, the track remains unchanged to the end of gameplay, and the Tsardom of Russia controls all Cossacks. Now, I don't know which side. You've got 2 different sides of this to show. I kind of think this looks more like a settled area, so I'm going to flip it over to the settled area to indicate it's frozen. If that ever happens, you could actually just remove it or something. I don't know. All right. The next one. The Ottomans have the Tatar invasions track. Now, we should have this. The Jasogor Khan Tatar invasion. That's what's going to show it. And I don't know which way it goes. I think it goes on Tatar invasions first. At the beginning of the game, the start box, the player must put Jasser for Khan marker. Okay. We'll change that. And I don't know what that means. After playing as event Defeat of Buryak Horde, the marker must be flipped to the Tatar invasion side. From this moment, after each successful Tatar invasion, the marker can be moved 1 box down the track, and player controlling the Ottoman Empire gains a victory point. The Holy Roman Empire has domination in the Reich track over here, and I think this is the correct marker for that. Indeed. This is the only way that you know which markers you have in these cases. And I kind of knew that, which is they're not in the setup section. To make a move on the marker possible, the player controlling the Holy Roman Empire must play as event Letter of Majesty card, and next as an event, the 30 Years' War card. I don't think they have to be immediately next, but at some point following. Again, that may be an issue of connotations that are possible from the word that, you know, are language specific. To move marker 1 box to the right, following impulses, he or she can play an operations point card value of 3, not combining. The marker can be moved to the left when the Kingdom of Sweden takes part in the 30 Years' War and the Holy Roman Empire loses a land battle against it. Then the marker is moved by 1 to the left. I think that happens every time that Sweden wins a battle against you. Not specified, but that's how I'm going to go. After the completion of the 5th game turn, the marker cannot change its position on the track. 5th game turn, I think Gustavus is going to be dying around then, so yeah. I'm trying to think what else. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth has the Union of Brest track. Now I have 2 markers for this. At the beginning of the game, the marker should be placed in the Start 0 victory point box. After playing as Event Union of Brest, the second marker must be placed on the victory points track. Okay. So this is what explains this. I will put this over here to remind me to look this up because I will need to. The second marker must be placed in the victory points track printed on the board. That's this guy. This track and marker are used to indicate a number of converted spaces. In the next impulses, for every successful conversion into Catholicism of a space controlled by the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in the Russian cultural zone, which is the green area. I didn't explain that. So, yeah, the game has these, each of the sort of religions, cultures, whatever, has its own zone as well. So you have, the Habsburg zone, the Ottoman zone, the Russian zone, which is this green area. The Polish zone is pink, and the Swedes are salmon because that's what they like to eat. Cabbage, not potato. Never mind. Okay. If the religion of the space changes into heresy, the marker must be moved onto a box with a value lower by 1. For every 2 converted spaces in the Russian cultural zone, the player controlling Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth gains a victory point. The marker on the Union of Brest track can be moved by 1 to the right, and the player takes 1 war fate marker. Okay. These are sort of victory points. Just a way to track additional victory points that you get in the game from certain activities. In this case, this is 1, but you also get them from battle. The marker must be moved 1 box to the left when 2 converted spaces change their religion into heresy. The war fate marker must be flipped or put aside to indicate a loss of victory points. So, this is a little confusing to me. I think you track these additional victory points separate from the Polish-Lithuanian victory points as they accumulate. Every successful conversion into Catholicism of a space controlled by the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in Russian cultural zone, the marker can be moved into a box with a value higher by 1. That would be not this, because this is every 2 spaces and is tracking that. It might be this on the victory point chart, but that's not clear what that would mean. If religion of the space changes into heresy, the marker must move into a box with value lower by 1. So what this may be is that this number here is tracking the total number of converted spaces, and then this is tracking the victory points for those converted spaces, which you then put on here, on the victory point track. I'm not really sure by the wording of this how that's meant to work, but that's the best I can kind of mangle out of it. All right, ruler's cards. So we've taken a peek at these. The ruler has a number of different abilities. I've already told you when the arrow is pointing up, they're healthy and young, and when it's down, they're old and perverted. Additional cards, which you draw in the card's drawing phase, preserved cards, additional ones you can save, funds limit, the total number of funds you can save between game turns. Domestic policy is in effect on internal affairs, which I think is going to affect... I don't know if it's going to affect this table, which is sort of a growth of domestic policy and improvement and deprovement or disimprovement, or this, which is the actual effect of the domestic policy. If it was just effect, it wouldn't be very good because this gives you like 2 cards. So this would actually be an additional card of -1, you know, if that were the case. So I think in some way it affects this, but not clear yet. We'll see what impact that has. And maybe have to figure that out as we start play. In every deck there's special cards, which have, on every card there's a number from 1 to 3 for the ops points, possibly with a plus sign. The title of the card, the instructions on how to play it as an event, standard CDG type stuff. Some cards have a colored stripe. There's a colored stripe. But that's not the right one. That say either reaction, battle, or reaction, battle inscription. These can be played at specific times, either during a battle to affect the odds outcome of the battle, or to counteract something that an opponent is doing, presumably with a card, but not sure if that's the limitation. Some say in reshuffle. Here it says, unused cards must be reshuffled after completion of the game turn. Okay, that makes no sense. That is not what they mean, I'm sure. What I think it means is you shuffle the unused cards with the already used and discarded set of cards. But yeah, that's... And again, there will be things like that. And this is going beyond grammatical issues too. Wow, you know, you're starting to make things not make sense, and this is one where I'm willing to step in and just say, well, as written, it's wrong. There are other places where things like that may be less certain. Now, this one may be it may be a translation issue. It's not absolutely certain. But there are some where I'm fairly sure that the original rules were lacking as well. At the beginning of game play, the deck of cards must be shuffled and placed backside up near the superpower sheet. This is the deck of unused cards. Played cards are put in a separate deck and can be viewed by all players at the same time. Now, there's no reason to reshuffle the unused cards, right? Those are already shuffled. So unless you're shuffling, yeah. When the deck of unused cards is finished, the cards are reshuffled, and then that is the deck of unused cards. I am going to need to break. I'm running low on battery. This camera eats juice like mad, and you know, my throat is starting to die as well. Let me make sure. Oh boy, my battery I was just using is not charging, which would be even worse. All right, so we'll come back. It's my great use of tweezers usually. I know we haven't gotten very far, but yeah, you know. I think we went over the components and the counters. So, game comes with a couple of wooden dice. I'm always iffy about wooden dice, so I probably won't use these. They always look pretty and everything, but the density of wood is not uniform, and I don't think there's a way of making fair wooden dice. Yeah, it can be pretty. They can be fair enough, I guess. 5 countries in the game: Sweden, Russia, Ottomans, Holy Roman Empire, and the Polish-Lithuanian. Okay. The sequence of play, well, okay, so there's a general rule about the sequence of play amongst the different powers, and it's listed, and then there's a reverse of it, which is used in other cases. This is represented in the diplomacy table by the order there, so you don't have to look it up in the rules if you are reasonable. do not have the player cards set up in player order. Instead, I have them set up near where their power would sit so that they could be near, their own pieces, which feels natural. There's also minor states in the game: Denmark, Brandenburg, Transylvania, Wallachia, and Moldova. The capital, okay, so we've got rules on these, and these may help me with the, hey, what's up with these counters, and should they already be on the board? The capital of each minor state, fortified city marked with an emblem, must be occupied by one infantry unit for the whole gameplay. This unit cannot move. And let me see if that's what we have here. So like Brandenburg in Berlin, yeah, that makes sense. However, okay, we have it in Denmark, yeah. Okay, just making sure. If a minor state is at war against a superpower, all available combat units are placed immediately on the capital city space, with an exception for Denmark, which I believe has to do with the Norwegian box up there that has a piece in it, threatening Sweden. If a minor state is at war against a superpower, different superpowers can join the conflict. To use this opportunity, the player controlling the joining superpower must play as event diplomacy card. I'm assuming there is a card titled Diplomacy, several copies of it in everyone's deck, because it's in italics. From that moment to the end of the current game turn, the player uses the minor state's combat units as though they're their own. During each commander's changing phase, and we don't have the sequence of play yet, we haven't hit that yet. These players must place full-strength infantry unit as garrison on capital space if that capital is not controlled by any superpower. I think this is the minors still. We're still... See, sometimes the numbering gets a little weird, but here it seems to be right. 4.0 is minor states, 4.1 is the rules regarding them. Place on the Baltic Sea all Danish naval units. Place 3 Tatar units on this space where they start. And place all available commanders on corresponding capitals with their armies. I think we're okay here. I haven't sorted through, but there weren't any listed there. Okay. Each one of the minors has its own special rules. If Denmark is at war against a superpower, all combat units are placed, if possible, on one of the given spaces in this order: Karlskrona, Malmo, or Copenhagen. Moreover, Danish units must be defeated in naval battle when the player controlling a hostile superpower is trying to move across the sea to Copenhagen. We basically have 2 seas in the game, the Baltic and the Black. Moreover, Denmark loses war if Copenhagen is captured and cities Karlskrona and Malmo are under control of hostile superpower. Again, grammatical issues, but that's fine. Player controlling this superpower gains a victory point in Karlskrona or Malmo, player's choice. Small control markers, that's these guys, must be placed on the chosen city, and you get a war fate 1 victory point marker, which, get this bonus victory point space, maybe they pile up there. Next, Copenhagen's returned to Denmark immediately. Put the infantry unit as garrison. If as a result of earlier wars, Denmark does not possess either of its smaller cities and the superpower wins the war, the player receives 2 victory points using war fate markers again. Brandenburg. Protection by the Holy Roman Empire. Player controlling the Holy Roman Empire, that is going to be the Habsburgs, may declare a war against any other superpower without paying in operation points, which combat unit entered any space in the Reich. Current relationship does not matter. This is one of those, boy, the grammar is so bad I'm not sure what they're saying. So, what is the Reich? Is it the entire yellow area? I don't know. I think so. Next, player controlling Holy Roman Empire takes from the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation box, which is over here, all available mercenary units. Other players also, the one at war against the Holy Roman Empire, give one mercenary unit that they have. All units recruited in that way can be added to one army of the Holy Roman Empire of the Reich, which I think is just the Habsburg player. Let's see if that's correct. Yes, they're not the Habsburgs, they're the empire itself. Okay. All units recruited, and this is odd because this is like under the Brandenburg rules, but it seems like if anybody enters the empire territory, bad thing, this stuff happens. The way it's worded. Player controlling may declare a war against any other superpower which combat unit entered any space in the Reich. The Reich is not just Brandenburg. Okay. Moreover, one commander can be transferred to that army as well. Events from cards, mercenaries switch sides, mercenary desertion, and mercenaries demand payment do not work on mercenary units in the Reich, which again I think is going to be within the yellow territories and nowhere else. In the situation described above, also Brandenburg is in alliance with the Holy Roman Empire. Exception played as event 30 Years of War card. We assume that card is going to help us understand just the extent of that exception. Player controlling the Holy Roman Empire can use combat units of this minor state as his or her own. Now that sounds like these armies can leave the imperial space, but yeah. But the mercenaries might switch sides or whatnot. If Berlin is controlled by other superpower, but the Holy Roman Empire recaptures this fortified city, Brandenburg returns to the gameplay in the next game turn, possessing all combat units. Which makes it sound like you can wipe out Brandenburg temporarily. If player controlling the Holy Roman Empire is at war against Brandenburg and captures other cities and or fortified Stettin, he/she cannot move domination in the right marker on his or her superpower sheet. This counter must remain in start box for the rest of gameplay. Moreover, rule about protection is ignored in the case superpower invasion of the Reich. Okay, which is if you take Brandenburg and other cities and or fortified Stettin. So my feeling is if you capture any of these cities somehow, and yeah, there's imperial units, there's Habsburg units stationed in some of them. If you capture those cities, you no longer operate as the Holy Roman Empire. You basically declared war on the German Empire. Okay. And dissolved it. As long as Stettin is not controlled by any superpower, shown mercenary unit is in that space as a garrison. Now this is a little weird. Oh no, there it is. Okay. Danzig is the one which has no garrison. Okay. Transylvania, Wallachia, and Moldova. Vassal subjugation, as indicated there, is special relationship between the Ottomans and the three minor states. At the beginning of gameplay, player controlling the Ottoman Empire puts big control markers on these three cities, and we have those in play. Those will add to the Ottoman victory points. Vassal subjugation is marked on the diplomacy table. The Ottoman Empire can establish vassal subjugation in two ways. playing an event diplomacy card, conquering all national spaces of a particular space. Player controlling the Ottoman Empire can choose vassal subjugation or conquest. Now, you will see that there are little markers in these spaces already for the subjugation. It's already in effect. What is the gray-green? I find it odd that there's nothing in Priva. Okay, this is weird. So the Ottomans, maybe I'm reading things wrong. The Ottomans are purple. Yeah, see, these do not have small counters in them. I have screwed up. I didn't notice these were question mark counters. Sarajevo, Osijek, Szeged, Szeged, Debrecen, Ackerman, and Carrick are all actually in the non-conforming. And I've done the same with other countries. I've got to fix this. Let me back away because the poles are also in that condition here. That's been fixed, and no other countries seem to have that impact. Yeah, missed that in the understanding the setup as I was going. Okay. If minor state is in vassal subjugation, player controlling can play as event calling the vassal card. Immediately, he or she can add all combat units to his or her armies and control these units as his or her own. If vassal subjugation is broken by any reason, all combat units of the minor state are immediately removed from the Ottoman army. I'm guessing that card specifies for one minor, but I don't know. If other superpower moves combat units onto any vassal space, then the Ottoman Empire can declare war without paying a cost. As an exception to normal rules, current relationship does not matter. All vassals' combat units are now under the control of the Ottoman Empire. Vassal subjugation can be broken by events, ambitions of Michael the Brave, or by playing as event diplomacy card. The player controlling the Ottoman Empire can play loyal vassal or spy as a reaction card, presumably with a band that says reaction on it. If vassal subjugation is broken, minor state Transylvania, Wallachia, Moldova cannot be supported by the Ottoman Empire in case of invasion. It all makes sense. But again, the particular... Okay, let's go on to the Tatars. A combat unit belonging to any superpower or minor state can move into the Tatars' national spaces, which are this one and this one, to not have to pronounce them. Player controlling the Ottoman Empire can also control Tatar combat units if he or she plays as event Crimean Tatars card. If this card is played as operational points, the player cannot move Tatars combat units. Makes sense. You either get events or ops points in general. If specified conditions are met, player controlling the Tsardom of Russia can take control over the Tatar combat units. See the Khmelnytsky Uprising card in the deck of the Tatars of the Tsardom of Russia. That may or may not be one they can start with. I think it probably isn't. If one or two Tatar national spaces is entered by a combat unit belonging to any superpower, player controlling the Ottoman Empire immediately adds 3 more Tatars, and we got them kicking around somewhere. I think they're down here. And takes control of all 6 combat units. See. Moreover, the player can declare war without paying cost and operations points. Exception, current relationship does not matter. This is interesting because You can do this even if, for some reason, you're at war with the Tatars, I guess. If Tatars' national spaces are captured, but the Ottoman Empire recaptures them, interesting. Then the player can reestablish Tatar's state, and the next game turn general rules are applied. Yeah, so this is kind of interesting because they're mixed. They can either be Ottoman or Russian, depending on the event play. Players controlling the Ottoman Empire can initiate Tatar invasions. Target of the invasion can be any space not controlled by the Ottomans or its vassals, and without a famine marker. And now we have special rules for that. And again, this is, a chromier game in a lot of ways in terms of heavy rules sections for minor stuff than you see in, like, Here I Stand. The Ottoman player plays as operational points a card with value 2. The Ottoman player, and this should be in the Ottoman thing, Tatar invasion, 2 ops points. Gives you a nice reference into the rules to tell you where to find it. The Ottoman player points out a space containing maximum of 3 Tatars. The Ottoman player can move Tatar's combat units each in a different direction as if it had 4 ops points. Quite fast. Naval units of the Ottoman Empire cannot be used to transport them over sea. When units' movement are completed, the Ottoman player rolls a d6 for each unit. On a 5 or a 6, the Tatar invasion is successful. A famine marker is placed in the invaded space. The player controlling the Ottoman Empire gains 1 victory point for each successful Tatar invasion if the event defeat of Bujak Horde is in effect. And then I guess those get marked here, as well as on the main victory win table, because you want to be able to compare and see who's winning at any given time. During Tatar invasion, Tatar's combat units are not allowed to initiate a land battle, but they must take part in a land battle if they were intercepted by a superpower. At the beginning of each game turn, 3 Tatars are placed back on their national spaces, free from enemy units. Okay. We have to swap batteries again. While I ran up to go to the bathroom, because if I have to swap batteries, I might as well take care of that and blow my nose and whatever. I noted something, which is most rule sets in America, from the big companies, whatever, come out with, hey, here's the basic concepts of play and telling you about that. None of that is here, right? Now, knowing that this is based on Here I Stand and Sword of Rome and that it's a CDG and everything, that makes this fairly easy, but none of that is really being taken care of too heavily so far in the rules, right? We don't even have a description, I think, of the normal cards, except at the very lightest level, as to how they might be used and whatever. And that leads to some worries, and we'll see if it ever gets covered. But instead what we're getting is these little snippets of, what I would call kind of chromy parts of the game, right? These are sort of the special rules that often get tucked way at the back of the rule set. Now, this would be horrible if it was your first time facing one of these one of these CDGs, multiplayer type things that there's a certain, idea of how you're going to play already in place. Because you would just be reading through this and saying, yeah, but what the fuck? What's the game about? What's going on, right? On the other hand, as someone who does know what the game's going to be about, and EU did this too, and maybe this a fair deal, La Grande Guerre, I'm being handed some of the most interesting little snippets of the game right up front, and that grabs my attention and says, ooh, I'm all excited already. I'm not just reading through the boilerplate, right? Again, I can see arguments for, I certainly don't think that it's the right way to write rules, but it actually appeals to me in some interesting ways. Okay, so Cossacks. Shown Cossack infantry units are available only after playing the Kemalinsky Uprising, which is also the one that affects the Tatars. When combat unit belonging to any superpower or minor state moves on Sikh space, which we don't know where it is. Here it is. It's sort of owned by the Poles right now. All available Cossack units must be deployed on Sikh, and land battle must be resolved immediately. If Cossacks were defeated in this battle, and again, this is, I think, only after this card is here, because the infantry units are not available. If Cossacks were defeated in this battle, shown infantry unit must be placed in Sikh as garrison. Which sounds like they fight a round of combat. If they lose, they come back for siege. The rest of Cossack units is eliminated. I think there's only 2. So the singular kind of makes sense, but it's odd. The rest is... if superpower or minor state conquers siege, control marker is placed in accordance with general rules. Well, that's already the case. What's up? In each game turn, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth have to pay for Cossack service. Player controlling the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth must play during every game turn as an ops point a card with a value of 3. It's forbidden to combine for any of these. If the player is no longer required to play the mentioned card once registered Cossacks is in effect. Boy. Oh. Hard to remember these things. If event registered Cossacks is in effect, player controlling the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth can plunder port spaces on the Black Sea. At the beginning of his or her impulse, without any cost in ops points, he or she conducts a plunder procedure. If Cossack naval units... All right, now we're in trouble. We've got a picture. I think these 3 are the Cossacks then. They've got kind of a purpley look to them, which would mean... I'm looking to see if we have something that's clearly the Cossacks. This might be... All right, this is problematic in terms of trying to find them. It won't be the green. Here we have this guy, Chmidsky or whatever, is here. Who are these purples? Purple would normally be the Ottomans. So we've got a 3-2 that looks like these guys. Are they all going to go on the board or just one? And then we have a 1-4. So yeah, these appear to be the Cossacks. I don't know for sure. And then that may mean that this is the Cossack control marker. All right, well, we'll keep going. Okay. If event registered Cossacks in an effect, the player controlling the Polish-Lithuanian can plunder port spaces. Here's the rules. If Cossack naval units, and see, these are dark colored, these are pale, and that is worrisome. Excuse me. He doesn't have this. Do the boats have the symbol on the back? Yeah, so the boats have the same flag. I don't know if you can see it, as these units, which I think means that these are Cossack control markers. These dark units are the Cossacks. What they can do, I don't know. If we look here, the Cossacks just have their seaborne units in the setup. Like I said, this is going to be kind of difficult to figure everything out. Okay, if Cossack naval units win a naval battle, this is the plunder, against Ottoman naval units, and that's this right now. There might be more. They have another ship they can build. The player controlling the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth points out a naval unit and a port space. Now, this concept of at the beginning of his or her own impulse, without any cost, he may conduct plunder. We don't know what the general sequence of play is yet. That hasn't shown up yet. Again, usually those kind of basic concepts come out of the way. That's why, when I saw this, I think sequence of play. We haven't gotten there yet. And again, I'm not even sure it's there. So let's keep working. Okay. Points out a naval unit in port spaces, then rolls a die. Result 5 or 6 means successful plunder. Famine markers put on space. Cossack naval units eliminated in naval battles are permanently removed from gameplay. So they're likely to run out. Cossacks revolt against the Polish-Lithuanians if they are not paid. In case of revolt on Sikh space, replace Commonwealth control marker with Cossack control marker. Well, we have those. Cossacks will be again under control of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth if Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth conquers Sikh space. I don't know the pronunciation. The Tsardom of Russia takes over the Cossacks when player controlling the Tsardom plays as event Cossacks under control. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth can regain control of Cossacks in 2 ways: military action, conquesting Sich, or playing as an event registered Cossacks. If event Cossacks under control is in effect, player controlling the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth cannot play as an event registered Cossacks. Okay. I feel like I might be getting some kind of contradiction here, but the Tsardom of Russia can recruit Cossack combat units and control Sich space, put small control marker, presumably Russian. Moreover, player controlling the Tsardom can use Cossack control markers to indicate control of a space in the Russian cultural zone. Now, why you would want to do that, I mean, presumably you might run out of Russian pieces if you conquer enough, and maybe that would be useful, but I think you probably wouldn't want to do that otherwise. What's not clear is if you do that, like if you already have Russian control markers down here, can you swap them out to get more? Because it looks almost impossible for me to run out of these. Now, there might be a reason that I want the Cossacks to have more territory. Maybe there's something that's going on that I don't understand yet. Okay. That gets us down to commanders and armies. And here we're going to get to how the game, the sequence of play, which is usually, the first thing after we look at the components, right? But what's strange is this is kind of components. So maybe it is trying to follow the same kind of thing, but it's throwing a lot of extra rules in right up front that are kind of chromy. They're definitely chromy. Okay, counters represent people. We got the little holders. Let's see if there's anything we need to deal with here. Some commanders are rulers. If the ruler changes, if their card comes out of play, the commander is removed. Commanders of minor states can command an army composed of combat units of allied superpower. The number of superpower units is limited by the number of minor state combat units in the army. And so, like, this is a Transylvanian. He has 3 Transylvanians and can have 3 Ottomans with him. Gustav II Adolf was the most outstanding commander of the time. Frequently, he was personally engaged in combats. When he takes part in a land battle, and player controlling Kingdom of Sweden rolls strange commas, rolls doubles for battle resolving it, it means that this commander suffers a wound. Counter must be moved into Stockholm, and ruler's card is flipped to its weakened side. If the card is already weakened, and it is the 5th game turn, he's replaced with his daughter. Each army is a minimum of 1 infantry or cavalry unit. These are called combat units. If there are many units, see above commander rules to avoid stacking. However, stacking is allowed. Every combat unit has 2 factors, manpower and combat value. It has 2 sides, full strength and weakened. Now, let's find one of these. So the thing you'll notice is the combat value actually doesn't change, just the manpower does, which may mean it's a multiplier or something. Like, we don't know. As a result of battle or other procedure, a combat unit can suffer losses. If it's full strength, it's flipped. If it's already weakened, the counter must be removed. Eliminated combat units can be returned to play, for example, after recruitment. Okay, we're losing our voice here. Naval units are combat units as well. On representing counter is only a combat value. Naval units cannot move. They operate only on one sea and can be removed as a result of naval battle. If superpower does not control any port space by the sea, all the naval units are removed from that sea. Because you need a basing. Combat units recruitment. Each superpower can recruit combat units. On a superpower sheet is their recruitment table. And I've got the units piled up in them. According to the table, you pay the cost in ops points. The counter strat is strictly limited. Minor states have combat units as well. Number type and placement is described in detailed rules or scenario rules in the scenario book. During your own impulse, one player plays as ops points a card with an appropriate value. Then he picks a combat unit from his available units. The unit can be placed in any national space without an enemy army. National spaces is not defined. I don't know what it means. I don't know if it means original color, how much control effects, or if it's in the cultural zone. Again, maybe we can find that out if we look at the board. National space, space in color of a particular superpower or minor state. Okay. I would think you can't put it in a place with an army. It appears you might be able to place it in some place that's controlled by the enemy, though, which bothers me. And we'll have to think about that. The unit can be put on any national space without an enemy army. Yeah, that sounds like you're going to need one hell of a garrison to take over anybody else's national spaces. The naval unit can be recruited and put on sea where superpower possesses minimum 1 national space with a port. Exception is the Tsardom of Russia. After playing the event Baltic Trade and controlling any port space, the superpower can recruit naval units in the Baltic Sea. It does have a port on the Black Sea, though. Wow. An army can be rebellious as a result of playing some cards as event. In the case of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, an army can be rebellious also because of playing as operational points war taxes special card. So if you choose not to play it as war taxes, there may be an event anyway. A rebellious army is marked with a rebellion counter. A rebellion can be suppressed in 2 ways. Commander's authority, play an operation point. The commander is moved on to a space occupied by the rebellious army. Paying additional 1 operations point, you roll a die. If the result is lower than or equal to the command rating, each leader has a single number on it. The rebellion is over. All combat units are controlled as any other superpower's army. It doesn't say what happens if you fail there. Military force, paying appropriate number of operation points. Player moves his or her army. It also doesn't say how far the commander how the commander moves there. Like, does he just teleport? A lot of questions. Paying appropriate number of operational points. Player moves his or her army onto the space occupied by a rebellious army. Then a land battle must be resolved. And by the way, I would assume he can kind of teleport. That's what I'm going with. Then a land battle must be resolved. If player wins the battle, rebellion is over, and all surviving units join winning army. If player loses battle, the rebellion continues. Moreover, the superpower must lose the number of military development points equal to the difference in subsequent in suffered losses. Development points are going to be tracked on here for 4 different types of development, one of which is military. Oh, where are we? All combat units with rebellion marker are removed from the board during the Army's return to capital cities phase, which is towards the end of the turn. Rebellious armies cannot move or intercept. The military level of the army is no shifts, the rebellion itself. A rebellious army attacked by other superpower or minor state can withdraw. In this case, the army is controlled by the player to whom the rebellious army belonged to. During withdrawal, rebellious army can enter national space of its superpower. Okay, so this is no. Okay, so the superpower who is being afflicted by the rebellion, his rebellion is controlled by him if the rebellion is being attacked, and he gets the choice to pull it out of combat into a national space of its superpower. Garrison, 1 infantry unit on a controlled fortified city or fortress space. I think this is a definition. It's just kind of floating out there. All right, we're going to stop because throat's going, battery's going, and I got crap to do and then sleep. Let's push on. Unfortunately, for those of you who follow me, my life, I've let it spin out of control into addiction. So, it is, I do almost nothing anymore. All right, so sequence of play is here. Funds gaining, cards drawing. It's kind of interesting the way this is worded. It feels like, Dr. Fauci talks this way. It's, again, a grammatical thing that's not wrong. It's just odd. Rulers change, commanders change. If you got rid of the active aspect of the verb, I would actually be happier. Because it's done in kind of a passive voice anyway, in a sense. Commanders change, negotiations, religious unrest, mercenaries hired, strategic deployment of one army. Sounds like risk there, and it is. Players get their impulses. We'll see how that works, because most CDGs, each person takes one impulse and then the next person goes. I don't recall if that's the case here. Armies return to their capital cities, remove auxiliary markers. I think that's these things. And then you implement the ruler's domestic policy. Okay. Now, the rest of the rules is this section 6, which feels, until we get to winning the game, a little weird. You know, out of a 20-page rule book, 3/4 of it is one rules section. I just, again, in terms of numerical organization, it seems odd. I would have probably Rule 6 be a tiny little thing, and then have each of these as its own, perhaps. I don't know. All right, funds. You get fund markers indicated by your economy marker on the track. Now, initially, it doesn't do you anything for most of these countries, for any of them. Yeah. None of them are in a bonus funds area, but eventually you get to a place where you start getting multiple fund markers. Very small difference between the 1 and the 2. And then there's victory point modifiers there. Sweden will also get fund markers based on its iron ore. So it can go up to 4 per turn, being very wealthy. That's a little weird. Because honestly, Sweden's main source of income at this point, even for their war effort, is probably France. until they start taking territory and funding the war effort through the territory they take during the 30 Years' War. So I'm a little iffy, but we'll see. We'll see. Maybe their deck plays that out differently than we expect. The player controlling gets that. Okay. And that's all we have. Each player has basically a track. They might get some funds off of it. And they just get little fund markers, a couple of little coins to indicate they have that money. Okay. I got these guys, which I've sorted into this stack. I think I have to worry about as I see them. These vassal subjugations, these may be victory points that are in. So this is odd. So I've got 3 vassals subjugated here, but these vassal subjugation markers are not generating victory points. So you see I've got 10 victory points from cities, and that's what's recorded on here as per this. I would be expecting these to be generating points by the counters, but I don't see that. And those counters already generate some victory points off of here. Oh well. We'll see what's up. Okay. Descartes, I'm sure, comes off a card. All right, card drawing. Each superpower deck includes a certain number of special cards. Their titles on the colored background on the backside. So you don't shuffle these in by accident. And then they say special card on here. So these cards can be used every game turn, and they're always added to your drawn cards. After you play it, you put it aside, not in your discard pile. Then you get additional cards and victory points for your fortified cities track. On every superpower sheet, there's an additional cards and victory points listed there. The victory points are just tracked on here. They're like keys. The cards, okay, according to scenario rules, some markers must be taken from the track and put on controlled cities on the map. At first, player must take, yeah. So these work like the keys in Here I Stand. As you take them away, you end up getting a bigger hand size, and you get some victory points. Now, there's something a little weird because I don't know if you can lose your last key or fortified city, and if you do, what that all means. Okay. Every box on the track contains instructions about a number of additional cards and victory points. Those are not cumulative. During gameplay, you can take control over a fortified city. On that space next, a big control marker must be placed. On the final space, there's a you win. Automatic victory conditions for every player for getting all their fortified cities out. Look how close to that the Poles already are. And for that matter, the Turks aren't far. So, gonna have to be a little bit careful there. The Polish army is quite good at the beginning of the game. 2 columns to the right in their military capability. Nobody else is anywhere near that. Now, if you look at, so what the army quality means is a little iffy to me. It's very clear in a game like Europa Universalis, where there's a technological aspect to the game, and you build that up. And armies just continuously get more and more technologically improved. And there are some exceptions. This is the period where the Polish army really kind of starts to falter. It may be a little before this, actually. And I'm really iffy in terms of technological capability. I'm really iffy on how high a quality it is at 1590. You go back 50 years, and yeah, it is as good as the Western armies are. Maybe better because of its high proportion of cavalry. And yes, they save Vienna and all that, but certainly technologically they're not as advanced as either Turkey or the Western armies are. However, they have that huge cavalry functionality, which may be what's being trying to be expressed here, because Cav doesn't have the kind of military effect in the game automatically. Okay. What else do we have here? If you lose a fortified city, the control marker is removed and put back on your additional cards, and you track your victory points, and on your next turn you'll get less cards. Player controlling Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth cannot place big control markers on Danzig and Königsberg. Now, Königsberg, this is the special rule. I was wondering why this is a tiny space on there. Well, that's why. It's a special rule. Danzig, we'll have to see the Danzig special rules. Maybe other people get control markers, get the big control markers on there, as opposed to the small ones. Moreover, on Danzig, infantry unit belonging to Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth cannot be placed as garrison. It is allowed to establish the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth garrison in Königsberg. And they say the as if that's a singular thing. I don't think it is. So again, that's that's a translation type issue. Domestic policy impact. Number of cards that you're going to draw is modified by your domestic policy, and that's here. The Austrians get a couple extra cards, and I think that's it. Russia is a waste case at the beginning of the game. 2 columns to the left of their military capability, 2 cards less, domestic policy. They are really in trouble in terms of what I'm going to call the technology of this game, which is advancing these policies. It may not just be that. Okay. Good harvest markers. That's these. You have good harvest and lousy harvest, which may be famine. I don't recall because I think those are the actual famine. Yeah, those are poor harvest. Okay, each good harvest marker gives you an additional card. Each one that you got on your last turn, and you collect them up on spaces. Each poor harvest that you got on your last turn, I'll reduce your hand size by 1. I guess it's possible to have no cards, which would suck. I don't know what that does to your special cards. And there's something a little weird here. We'll talk about that. So here that you get your special cards. I think the rest are additional cards in addition to your special. So you probably always have your base 1 or 2 cards. Does anybody have 3? And then, so you just wouldn't get any additional if you drop down below. You wouldn't lose your special cards. Ruler's card can give you additional cards. You add up all the modifiers, you draw those additional cards. If you have any preserved cards from last turn that you saved due to your ruler, these are also part of your hand. So these hands can be quite large. You can discard a fund marker and then see all unused cards and choose one marked with a red asterisk symbol. In this way, only 1 card can be selected. The rest of the cards must be reshuffled and placed on the unused card deck. Now, at the beginning of the game, for the grand campaign, this is all different. The first turn begins from cards drawing phase. I think the chosen cards are only limited to these. And on turn 2, then you'll have the ability to kind of choose any of these play once events out of your deck. Wow, that seems... so I don't like this mechanism from what I'm reading of it. I'll tell you 2 reasons why I don't like it. One is everybody is going to be Well, so you have to be aware of what there is beforehand to make that choice, which bothers me because I see the event decks in these kind of games as, especially in a game that, like this, which is not, Here I Stand is kind of not quite Twilight Struggle level, but there are going to be players who memorize the deck, who play it enough, who will know this goes into that, this plays into that, just have this whole strategy of manipulating the card deck. The thing I like about both Here I Stand and Twilight Struggle and Sword of Rome, a little less on Sword of Rome. Sword of Rome you do kind of have to know the deck. Well, in any of them, you can play it reasonably well with other people who don't know the cards. As long as you're not playing against a shark, you can play it okay, and you don't need to plot things based on your knowledge of the card deck. Paths of Glory is the opposite. Paths of Glory, you can't get historically accurate results if you don't know the cards and understand how to manipulate them ahead of the game. Now, this game has huge decks of cards. I don't know how many red stars are on there. You're going to have to be. I don't know. I guess you can't even look to make things fair if you're not willing to expend a fund, right? Which definitely gives a huge advantage to people who memorize, but I don't mind there being a huge advantage. But the big question is it worth spending your fund to look for an event when you're not sure that there are any in there that are worth having? The other factor has to do with the actual components of the game. These cards are very, very stiff. They're going to be a pain in the ass to shuffle. It's big decks. I do like 10 riffs with a few insertion shuffles going on in there. That's a big cost for especially playing it solo for five different decks every turn of the game. Just because somebody needs to paw through their deck and see what they have. And that's kind of painful. And there's no compendium to help people who want to be. So if you have a situation where somebody kind of knows the deck fairly well and other people don't, you're going to want to make some kind of player aid to help the people who don't know the deck. But I tend to view the event card decks, especially when they're kind of large, as this sort of, you just don't know what's going to happen, and maybe you have some vague idea of history, but you're looking at them kind of like, things that just happen to you, because the rulers didn't know these things were going to happen in a lot of cases. Some cases they would. Like the foregoing problem with the, Vasas controlling both Poland and Sweden, and that was an untenable situation. Okay. Onward. Drawing the rest of the cards. You get the rest of the cards from top to bottom. You lose one. Okay, if you spent to select a card, that's one of your excess cards. All right. Then you can discard an additional fund marker to put used cards, up to 4 of them. So the way this is worked, to put on used cards deck, maximum 4 cards, and draw the same number from unused cards. So you can throw out up to 4 cards by paying a fund marker. That seems exceedingly valuable if you've got shitty cards. Of course, it might take some time to figure out what shitty cards are, knowing distribution and whatnot. After calculating card number and drawing them, some random other by choice, you have cards in your hand. These will be used by the player during current turn. Now, this is actually kind of interesting because it says you can see all unused cards and choose one marked with red asterisk symbol. This actually makes the reshuffle and the way that it's worded that I don't think it's meant to be to make sense, which is that you get to see your entire deck of cards, understand exactly what's coming in the near future, and you will know that. And then the reshuffle only reshuffles your unused cards. And now I'm left not sure whether or not my choice was the correct one in terms of interpretation. I am completely incapable of remembering, even if I was playing this opposed, what my deck of cards is going to provide to me. If there was a rule like that, I would really want to be able to look at the deck regularly after I've spent that fund until the next reshuffle to make any sense. I don't think that's what they mean, but honestly, a lot more of the textual evidence is leaning towards that. But because that's really hard for me to play, and I don't want it to be the way what they mean. Okay. Okay. Rulers changing. The next phase up there is going to be an ability to change your rulers according to the ruler's reign list. I don't know where that is. It is not in here. The back of this has some 30 Years War rules, but nothing else. You have to remember that. And I don't remember seeing anything like that in the rulebook. So the only thing that I can think of is the cards, essentially, are that list. I'm fine with that, except there are some places where there are multiple people who come in on one turn, and I don't know what that means. So we'll keep looking. Ruler's reign list is down here. Okay. It doesn't look like a list, it looks like more rules. I'd want that set out in some way. A ruler can be changed during the ruler's change according to the ruler's reign list. A ruler can be changed also during the player's impulses when a special procedure is conducted. During ruler changing phase, a player can decide if the current ruler stays one game turn more. You can prolong the leader by one game turn. If you do this, it's possible that the next ruler do not appear in gameplay because its reign game turn has passed. If reign period of this ruler is longer than one game turn, it appears when its predecessor must step down. Now we have some examples. Now, with a set of rules like this, I usually don't like reading examples. I feel like the rules should be clear. But so much in this game I'm left with questions about that I do feel like I have to boil into them. Let me swap batteries, and I will do so. And it's going to take me fucking forever to get through the rules, and probably even longer to play, just because of the way my life is. I'm not able to approach games the way I used to be able to because I'm fucking addicted to a computer game. Let's take a look at this. I think what's happening here, though, is that a leader who's due to not be still a ruler, you can extend them a turn. So let's assume it's the 5th turn, and the player controlling the Ottoman decides the reign period of the current ruler, Murad IV. Okay. And I read this, but I didn't have the pieces. So Murad IV is a game turn 4 ruler. That's the only turn he's supposed to be on the board. Will be prolonged one more game turn in accordance with the rule 6.32. This means that the ruler card of Ibrahim I will not be used in gameplay. He's just gone, because his reign period passed. See the ruler's reign list. In 6th game turn, the card of Murad IV will have to be replaced by the next leader, which is Mehmet IV at turn 6. Now, it is possible, though, that Murad can die during turn 5, even though you extended his turn. Let's assume that there is a 5th game turn during... yeah, let's. During ruler's changing phase, player controlling the Kingdom of Sweden decides the reign period of Gustavus Adolphus will be prolonged one more game turn. In 6th game turn, this card will be replaced by a card of Christina. We'll look through these. Okay, so Gustavus is turn 3. Turn 5 is Christina. She's got a weird star there, which I don't know. So yeah, if you can keep him alive, that's great. All right. Ruler who does not have any successor cannot be removed. He can only be weakened. His card is flipped on the back side. All right. So now this is weird. His card is flipped on his backside with arrow pointing down as a result of playing the event as event ruler's disease card. Boy. So this is just weird. I think this only applies if the event ruler's disease card is played when there's no living successor. No one whose turn has happened yet. I think that's what they mean by that. This is not some general rule that a ruler who does not have a successor cannot be removed. Okay. And now we have an example here. In case of Holy Roman Empire in third game turn, Matthias the First, here's Ferdinand, is a successor of Ferdinand. And you see Matthias the First and Ferdinand are both game turn 3 leaders. Is that an example or is it an exception? I don't know. Ruler change can happen during player's impulses phase. There's two ways. A ruler's disease card, every ruler, also reigning another superpower, can be weakened or eliminated if already had been weakened. I have to see the card to understand what that sentence means. Playing as event ruler's disease card. In this way, every ruler, also reigning another superpower, can be weakened or eliminated. Is the card going to be pick a ruler to cause a death to? Or is it going to be every ruler in the game is diseased? The way it's worded, it sounds like every ruler in the game. I find that highly unlikely. Palace Coup. It's conducted when played as an operations point, a card with plus sign. Okay, this is not something that's on here. So, before any action, ruler card is flipped on backside or replaced by successor's card, if it had already been on the backside. In this way, only ruler of player's own superpower can be weakened or replaced. I get the feeling anytime you play operations point with a plus card, you are going to fuck your ruler, from the way this is worded. This is the only place I remember seeing this, and it's kind of past my memory already. I'm worried I might not remember this because the plus cards sound like a great thing. What this tends to say to me is you will only play those as events unless you don't mind losing your ruler or weakening him. Okay. Then we get to a list of all the rulers. And I gotta play with my battery because it's pretending that it's fully charged and it's not. These sections with the pieces all out and everything, you know, things made a lot more sense when I was just reading through rules. They often do. And then I come to actually dealing with, you know, them. And it comes to, wow, what the hell is that all about? And it's easy to just put things out of your mind that you're like, I'm not sure I understand what that is. I guess I'll figure it out when it comes. Well, some of these are becoming quite hard. You know, most of the CDGs that are out there, well, most of the ones that I've dealt with at least, are by, you know, companies like GMT, Compass. I remember some iffy stuff around theirs, but, you know, just so much more ironclad and solidly developed rules than I'm seeing here. I can think of one exception, which is Assyrian Wars. I don't have my war games down here, which was by one of the Udos. I want to say Greb, but I don't remember because that may be Uwe, I think. That may be one of the Euro designers. There's like two. One's a Euro designer, one's a war game designer, and I get them confused. Game I really loved, but boy was, you know, there were a lot of questions. not a tournament-ready game. And I feel, you know, with this, because of its background, because of its, you know, building off of Here I Stand and Sword of Rome, it's aiming more for that tournament market, and it really is not. It really is not. It's going to need, you know, it would need years of development to get to that kind of solid rules base. And this is not, I think, all translation issues. Okay. So, before gameplay begins, the ruler card of Sigismund III is placed on the superpower sheet for Sweden. Got that here. And it's a regency, so it's not going to be very good, right? Sigismund, yeah, it's the Regency Council. If Regency of Duke of Sodermaland is played as an event, all instructions are implemented, then the ruler card is flipped on Charles IX of Sweden. Well, that's interesting. So unlike everything else, there's not a weak side of this. There's a Charles IX okay side. Probably something the Swedes want to do no matter what, because this is a card that they have the opportunity to pull out at the beginning of the game. And they don't have to spend funds to do so. Again, things are a little different on the first turn, from what I can tell. This ruler is also a commander, so the counter is immediately placed on Stockholm space or with any Swedish army. Other ways to change the ruler of the Kingdom of Sweden during first game turn are forbidden. Now, this is a gameplay thing, but this is a horrible card, right? I mean, yeah, it's not that bad. Okay, but it's not a good card. But this is a very powerful card. And it leads you to the idea of, yeah, you know, I really do want that. Now, what exactly domestic policy is on the card is of some importance, and what you do about it. And again, this is not explained. First of all, I don't think it's this, which is sort of the advancement track. I don't think it just changes that. I think this creates a modification to what's here, but are you supposed to up the counter or reduce the counter based on that card? Or do you just apply the modification to whatever that counter is? I think the latter. Because if you modified the counter, that could cause issues like if you improved yourself above the top level or something like that. So he's got 2 cards or more. The domestic policy is decreased by 1. If that was already in place, then it just wouldn't matter. So the country has a 2-card bonus. He reduces that by 1. I think that's what's meant to happen there. Again, this stuff is not explained, at least that I recall. Okay. Charles IX of Sweden can be used if it was not in play during the first game turn as a result of the event Regency of the Duke of Sodermaland on game turn 2. So you have another opportunity, but here you're having to spend a fund and whatever. Of course, and I'm digging into, you know, choices in the game, but I feel like if you're going to call stuff out if stuff's going to be in the rules itself, we have to discuss it and understand it there. So in this case, this is the one bonus card that the Swedes can take, and I don't see why they wouldn't take it. We'll have to look at the card and see if there's, you know, a price to it other than just a card. But it really feels like Sigismund sucks. Now, here's the interesting thing. You get your modification for domestic policy off the card you start the turn with. You get bonus. There's leaders who are 1-turn leaders. They may never get their policy implemented. Well, they could die during the turn is the one way they could never get their policy implemented. Fair enough. Turn 3, we get Gustavus Adolphus, then Christina, then Charles X on turn 7. And those are all in good order. Things are going to be weirder for Russia, because this is the time of troubles. Before the gameplay begins, put on the superpower sheet Fyodor the First. That's going to be here. Now, the way this is designed is I think you're supposed to only have 1 card on there, but I like to have the set on there because I don't have a hell of a lot of table space here. But yeah, we have Boris Godunov coming on the same turn. And now that I know that there's other leaders on the back of some of these, at least one of these cards, I'm a lot more worried. Game turn 1. If Fedor is eliminated, ruler card Boris Godunov can be used. Okay. Game turn 2. If Boris Godunov was not in play in the first game turn, his ruler card cannot be used. You must use Vassal IV of Russia, who's on the other side and is a reduced version. Interesting. Okay. Player must use Vassal IV of Russia, weakened side of Boris Godunov card. I don't know if Boris is weakened if that brings Vassal in. I guess it would, because, you know, the alternative is Boris died, in which case there would be another leader instead anyway. So I think that works fine as a weakening side. Turn 3 they get Michael, and then turn 6 they get Alexis, where things are, you know, back to normal kind of. The Ottomans. Before play begins, put on the superpower sheet the card of Murad III. That's who I have there. If Murad III is eliminated, Mehmet III can be used. And again, I need to make sure. On turn 2, Ahmed I comes in. So we have 2 turn 1 leaders on for the Turks here, but then we go to Ahmed. Turn 3, it's Osman II. But if Osman is weakened, you get Mustafa the Mad, who I am assuming is on the other side of Osman, because otherwise things wouldn't work. It wouldn't make sense with the weakened thing. And then we go normally Murad IV, Ibrahim, and Mehmed IV. Okay. The Holy Rolling Empire. You start with Rudolph of Habsburg. Game turn 1 is Rudolph II of Habsburg, same person. Okay. Game turn 3, first ruler card of Matthias I of Habsburg, and then Ferdinand II. So I had these in the wrong order. It doesn't tell you in the playlist how to set these up. This is the only place it tells you. And, you know, I read the rules, came down to set things up, used the playbook to set things up. I don't know. Yeah. But this is a little painful. Okay, Ferdinand II goes into Ferdinand III on turn 5, and then Leopold I, and they're just normal situations there. The Polish-Lithuanians. Sigismund III is on turn 1. Turn 5 and turn 6, you go to Vladislav and John Casimir. All normal, all reasonable. Which is weird, because in a way, Poland has maybe, you know, Austria too, the Empire too. But I was going to say Poland has one of the weirder political situations going on in terms of the crown. But the Vasas are being elected each time, you know, so it's a period of still fairly strong monarchy compared to what you get not too much longer out of here. But those could be end of dynasties. All right. Well, given that the rule book, you know, the rest of the rule book is this section 6, I am going to take a pause here. But, well, let's do the commanders changing. That's simple enough. Okay, so on each of the commander counters, it lists a turn or a span of turns that commander exists. Counters representing commanders which are not in play in the current game turn must be removed in the commander's changing phase. In this phase, players now place new commanders on spaces with its own army. The ruler commander, whose reign is prolonged by one game turn, does not remain as a commander. So, you know, Gustavus Adolphus, if you keep him an extra turn somehow, he's too old, you know. I'm not sure I believe that. I find it really hard to believe that however old Gustavus Adolphus got, he wouldn't still be charging into battle. But, yeah, you know, I mean, what was it? The King of Bohemia, who was blind and... Okay, but maybe he didn't help much. Maybe he wasn't a real leader, but he certainly had an impact. All right, we're gonna go to the negotiation, and we're gonna hold off before we go to the negotiation and alliances. I think I'm gonna load this up and do this in several parts because I'm having a hard time. First of all, the video gets really, really huge, and I think the important piece is that initial part where I discuss, you know, the core concept of the game and everything. That's going to be of value to far more people. Going into all of this is not even necessarily important to people who are going to watch the rest of the playthrough, but, you know, I think that first part is of such importance that I'm going to give it a little bit. I'm going to break into multiple videos, and since I'm at about the halfway point in the rules, although going through the rules themselves is denser and slower than some of the other stuff, I also did all the intro stuff. This is a good place to hold. Plus, my voice is cracking and all kind of other stuff.